This is Stranger Than Fiction News, broadcasting live from the dark side of the planet. We're going to be talking about the EMF 390 today, talking about what it does, how it works, why you need one. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're surrounded by radiation, we're surrounded by death towers. Some places are worse than others. And getting a meter is like wearing a condom. It's about reducing your exposure as much as possible. It's about regaining some sort of control in your life. Dangerous electric fields and pulsed radiation are a real threat to you and those you love. Studies show electric fields attack the nervous system, it attacks your immune system, it interrupts your sleep, makes it more difficult to concentrate, it affects your mood and your vibe, among other things. So EMF is extremely bad. Long-term exposure should be reduced whenever possible. And getting a meter helps you understand, where the danger zones are. And, there's different types of electric fields. There's the static electric field, like the video guy right now. And then there's the pulsed electric field, like from these death towers. Divvy going down. You see that? How interesting is that? But essentially, the meters pick up static or pulsed electric fields. And anything above 1 is essentially the danger zone according to the Bioinitiative safety standards and, all of the research. So whether it be 1 milliwatt per meter squared or 1 volt per meter, or 1 milligauss, anything above 1 is essentially the danger zone. And this meter has many different ways of displaying, that type of information. And essentially, the display is on the front and the sensors are on the back. So when you're when the back of the device is pointed towards the radiation source, that's when you're going to get the highest readings. That's how you can tell, where the source is coming from. So it's not like pointing the tip of it up on top towards the radiation source so that the back is pointing towards the ground. You want the back of it pointing towards possible, sources of exposure. And we're going to bring up a map of my hometown, Fargo. This is from Cell Mapper, and it shows you the different zones that the cell towers are covering. In fact, it's not like a perfect circle. These things aren't transmitting in a perfect circle. They're transmitting in a grid, and they have sectors. And, sometimes, north of the street is not being hit. Sometimes the beams are very narrow. Sometimes they're a little wider in nature. But being right underneath the death tower is not necessarily the most dangerous place to be. And these things essentially focus at a specific location like a spotlight. And it's, that's where the danger zones are in your town. As far as driving around, as far as, parking lots and, playgrounds. But of course your rooms become catastrophic as well, because they have wireless devices, not as big as, these death towers, but your phone is highly radioactive. The phone on the other side of these death towers are highly radioactive. It's two-way communications, and so essentially the cell phone is as deadly as the cell tower. But what makes it worse is that the cell tower, we should say the cell phone, is in your pocket right next to your head. And when it comes to the physics of antennas, being right next to the antenna itself is a very dangerous place to be. But then these things create a spotlight, a lobe of radiation, and it's very, distinct. It's kind of like, swimming in the ocean. You go through a hot layer and a cold layer, or, hiking up in the mountains, you've got a cold layer of air and a hot layer of air. They just have these lobes. You can't really see it, but it's there. And so, these meters help you understand, where these lobes are, in a sense. You can now see what normal people can't see, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the EMF 390 standard has all sorts of modes, all sorts of displays to show you, what's going on with the radiation. Now, some modes are measuring peak strength, and some modes are measuring average strength. So, depending on which mode you're in, the numbers are going to look a little different. And that might seem weird, but they're measuring different things. And, they've done this to kind of give you the ability to see more instead of standardizing everything into just, average or peak. Because it's nice to know what your average exposure is. It's nice to know what your peak exposure is as well. Now, this is the vertical mode. You saw the menu. If you have one, you basically want to play with the buttons. It's, it's not a touch screen. It's not an iPhone, and it's not $1,000 either. So, the interface is a little more like a Game Boy, but it works extremely well. And we're going to be talking about, basically the lab results. We brought this thing into the lab to see what it does, to see what it can do, and the like. Here again, cruising around in vertical mode. And you should be at 0.001. Now, we mentioned that anything above 1 is extreme. 1 is 1,000 times the exposure level that you're getting in the country, essentially, or in an EMF free environment. So when you start seeing, readings like 5 milliwatts, 10 milliwatts, it doesn't seem that bad, but it's essentially 5 or 10,000 times worse than what you're getting out in the country. And that's the issue, ladies and gentlemen. I know we've got more video to cover. Now, essentially, all of these death towers, all of this technology is going to make the smart cities possible. Robocops, Terminators, driverless cars. Smart cities suck. Nobody wants a smart city. Nobody wants a radioactive city. But you can't opt out. You can't opt out of the radiation. And, again, the phones, they're intense. They're worse than, being right next to a death tower. Far worse. And that's what you need to find out. How bad is it? Again, here we're seeing, some footage of the EMF 390. You're seeing 30, 50, 60 milliwatts. Now, in this mode, the RF browser mode, if you play with the buttons, you'll see there's a little screen that says 1 second, 3 second, 6 second, 9 second. And that's, measuring cumulative dose. I like to bring it back to 1 second to see instantaneous, exposure. You still get that in the upper right. You've got another little set of numbers, and that's instantaneous exposure versus cumulative exposure. The graph is just kind of giving you an idea of the wave formation. But again, here, everything we're seeing is between 5,000 times to 30,000, 50,000 times worse than, just being out in nature. That's how high it is. When you're seeing 0.243 there, that's 243 times nature, 42 times nature right now. 14 times nature. So, it's interesting as you're driving around, you'll see areas where it's relatively light, and then you'll see areas that are relatively high and, extremely high. And you have to wonder, why. And when you see them, erecting death towers, on school property, and you see what people are getting exposed to, you can't imagine anything other than they're trying to nuke your kids, essentially. And that's the thing. So I like cruising around in this mode. It just seems more feature rich. Wow, it looks like the suspension's about to, But depending on where you live, you're at a higher risk than other people. And when you add in, your phone, your routers, what's going on at the mall, at your work. And that's the thing. Is your paycheck really worth what you're getting dosed with? And you might say, sure, why not? But essentially, probably not. When you have to go through, the disease, it probably wasn't worth it. And so, and this causes, a myriad of different diseases. But you may want to see, which retailer is shopper friendly, because they're not all shopper friendly. I could name names, but every time I go by a Foot Locker, it's like you're getting nuked like you wouldn't believe. And, there are other places like that where, they're really nuking their customers. And you wouldn't know that unless you had a meter. But not every store is the same. Not every, shopping mall is the same. Not every gas station is the same. And that's kind of like the nice thing about having a meter. You can choose, a better parking spot. You can choose a better playground. You can choose, a better beach. I've been to beaches where, they are just dosing everyone on the beach and they don't even know it. And I've been to beaches where there's nothing, no radiation, just like a mile away, same coast, just different beach. And you've got, some that are just totally radioactive and others that are not, ladies and gentlemen. And so, this thing, I take it everywhere, especially when, going to places I don't know. Going to visit apartments to rent or a house to rent, or, over to a friend's place or to a party. How long do I really want to hang out at that party? The EMF 390 will let me know. And, you might think that's, a little gay, but literally, I don't want to sit there and just get juiced for nothing. There's enough things going on in the world right now. We don't need all of that. So here's a quick comparison video right next to a Death Tower. And, we've got the gigahertz solution, the tri-field meter, and the EMF 390. Now, some of them are in peak mode. Some of them are in average mode. If you look at the tri-field right now on the left, it looks like Back to the Future. It looks retro. It looks cool. It's got big numbers that say milliwatts per meter squared. And then in the upper left, it's got a little number, and that's your peak. And you can see there's a difference. It's peaking at 2.6, and the average reading is at 0.963. Now, where the sensors are on each one of these devices is different. Every meter is a little different, and sometimes a couple inches makes a difference in terms of exposure. So and none of the numbers are ever going to be static, because it's not a static electric field. It is a pulsed electric field, and these meters only really pick up a fraction, or can display a fraction of what's really going on, because essentially a 1 gigahertz transmission is a billion cycles per second. You can't display a billion ones and zeros or on and offs and the like. So you get an average per second. Now you'll see that the gigahertz solution and the EMF 390 are about 1.453 or 1.841. They're about the same. The gigahertz solution displays it a little bit differently. I think we can kind of show you that, hopefully, but let's see. We'll zoom in on the little knobs here for you so that you can see how it's displaying the information. But essentially, you're seeing 199.9 microwatts. That little U there is microwatts per meter squared. And then it's like 1,099 microwatts. Now, a microwatt is 1/1000th of a milliwatt. So it takes 1,000 microwatts to get to 1 milliwatt. So basically, the knob pointing down right now at 2,000 microwatts approximately is 2 milliwatts max. So it doesn't give you a real big max. And if you look at the range, we're going to be talking about that later, but underneath where it says HF35C, it says 800 megahertz to 2700 megahertz. So basically, you've got a real small range. Now, this is a commercial range. Most of the traffic is sitting in between 800 megahertz and 2700 megahertz. But it's real, it's real finite in terms of its range. And you can see the max power density is 2 milliwatts, essentially. And so, you're just not seeing a whole lot of stuff. Now, you'd think like they'd be getting blasted a whole lot more than 2 milliwatts given the proximity of this Death Tower, but these rectennas are pointed at something, and they must not be pointed directly at him. Otherwise, he'd be getting the 10, 20 milliwatts. But as you can see, in the EMF390, in the milliwatts, you see 1.601. And in the gigahertz solution, you see 1.44, basically 1,442 microwatts, which is 1.44 milliwatts. And then in the tri-field is somewhere in between. It's got the peak of 2.3, and it's reading an average of 0.64. So we'll be getting into the tri-field meter a little bit, but you can see that the EMF390 and the gigahertz solution are really close. And the tri-field meter, it's a little less close. But let's see if we can get into more on, how this works, why it works, and the range and the like. Now, a few months ago, we played this video with the tri-field meter. Again, it looks nice. And it tops out, now this thing tops out at 20 milliwatts. So it's got a bit more range than the gigahertz solution. But it tops out at 20 milliwatts, and so you don't see exactly what's going on above 20 milliwatts. Now, that guy was behind a window like 2 blocks away from the death towers, and it was worse than being right in front of the microwave oven, right? So that gives you an idea of, how bad the situation is out there. And again, not every location is the same. We see a huge variation as far as what exposures are from apartment to apartment, house to house, street to street. Even if they're right next to the death tower, it really just depends on where these antennas are pointed. And we've played this science experiment, a high school science experiment, where they're showing you that life does not grow, sprouts do not sprout in the presence of the Wi-Fi. That's how deadly it is. And they're bringing this everywhere. You're going to have 50-foot death towers near your homes, everybody. Now this is another mode of the EMF390. It's got a nice looking display. Fits in the cradle, fits in your pocket. And, out in the country, out in the mountains, 0.001 milliwatts. Now in this mode, it tells you what the strongest signal strength is. And it has another set of metrics. If, we're not going to show that here, but it does measurements in microwatts per centimeter squared as well. And there's an auto function that really brings it down to nanowatts, picowatts. And so you can get a real finite reading of low energy transmissions. 1 milliwatt per meter squared is just an average low. There's much lower than that that you can register. But this truly is like a scientific instrument. And so here it is in the all-in-one mode, where it's showing you static electricity. You got electric fields and magnetic fields, as well as the pulsed electromagnetic fields, or the RF radiation. And in the all-in-one mode, it gives you a little graph. It shows you a little bit of what you're being exposed to visually. It can be helpful. It looks cool, and the like. And so this meter doesn't just pick up the RF radiation, it picks up the static electric fields, which are very dangerous as well. Now, the little El Cheapo meters from Home Depot for like $20 or whatever, they only pick up the static fields. They don't pick up the pulsed electromagnetic fields. So that's okay for measuring, the electric fields from a wire or from an appliance or something like that. But that doesn't give you the full picture of what's going on in your location. Now, tri-field meters range from like $100 to, $400 or so, or even more. And, this one is at $129. That's why we like it as well. We'll be getting into all of that, but the measurements, or we should say the sensors, are on the back of this device, and the front is the display, and immediately behind it are the sensors. So the sensors have to be pointed at the direction of the source. Now, if you don't know where the source is, you just kind of hold it basically parallel to the surface of the ground, right? And you just kind of like go in a circle, and eventually you'll see where the source is. So you can fox hunt, illicit sources of radiation, hidden cameras, or whatever that might be, in your area, or death towers that are hidden, in chimneys or church steeples and I've driven by churches and I was really surprised to see, a death tower right there in the steeple. Do the churchgoers even know? That's the thing. And that's when you really start getting suspicious. When you see, radiation like that where Christians congregate, you see, all of this radiation at stadiums, you see all of this radiation, at busy intersections. When you start seeing, the layout of radiation in your area, you'll start to think like, they're trying to get you. They're targeting, areas where people go with the most amount of radiation when, they could do it completely different. But you see like how, malicious they are, with their aiming of these death towers and positioning, of these networks. Now, again, this is the cell mapper of Fargo, North Dakota, my hometown. And, it kind of shows you the different death towers, per service provider. And you can see that these things aren't just like, transmitting in a circle. It's not a perfect circle. It's not a, kind of like an old, television, satellite broadcast or whatever. These aren't perfect circles. They're not ripples in the pond kind of transmitters. They're directional and very directional, they, especially now with the beam forming. But, you can have a tower that's basically, illuminating one side of the street and not the other. So, having a meter is an excellent tool for, prospecting, new places to visit, new places to rent, new places to buy, as well as, are you considering, changing your job, working at a different office or whatever. Maybe you want to scan, what those people are getting dosed with, before you say yes, because it's probably not worth it. Back in the day, I used to work at a very big tech company, a very big one. And, there was like Wi-Fi routers everywhere, workstations everywhere, and everybody was setting up, hidden networks, and you had all sorts of hot spots. I mean, and you'd start feeling like, something. I don't want to get into it, but you'd feel stuff. And you hear people talking about, their symptoms of EMF exposure. And, it's just not worth being in an environment like that. It's not worth taking your kids to a school like that. And sometimes it's not as obvious as this. Sometimes you might think, oh, your school's nice and proper. And, you go out and test and you find out, no, it's worse than the public school, or it's worse than the charter school, or vice versa, and the like. Let's see. I know we've got, a whole lot of other interesting footage, and I really want to get into the lab experiments with the EMF 390. I think that's, somewhat insightful, hopefully, if we can find that. Not sure what the video guy is doing there on vacation. So we brought the EMF 390 and the tri-field meter to the lab, and here we've got a radio transmitter where we can select the frequency. Right now we're at 1 gigahertz frequency, and we can select the power output, and you just flip it on, and you can see how they respond. So this is at 1 gigahertz. They're pretty close. Again, their position isn't exactly the same in time and space, and their sensors aren't exactly the same, but they're pretty close. When you flip it on, you get a response. Now, when he goes up to 2 gigahertz here, you see a huge difference. And the reason is that you're getting basically, diminishing returns as the frequency goes up with some of these meters. So let's just play that again, because I think, people might have missed that. He goes pretty quickly here. But we're going to start with the 1 gigahertz burst. And, when it's at 1 gigahertz, they're both pretty much, in the same ballpark. And again, there's slight differences in terms of position and facing the EMF 390 and perhaps things that are obstructing, but they're about 15, 18 milliwatts, ballpark right there. So they both register the same thing. And again, that was in the RF browser mode. Now he shoots it up to 2 gigahertz, and at 2 gigahertz, the EMF 390 is picking up 90 milliwatts, and the other meter is picking up 8 milliwatts. Now he shoots it up to 3 gigahertz and does another burst, and you see that they're above 20 milliwatts right now. So at 3 gigahertz, this one seems to perform. They both seem to perform about the same. At 4 gigahertz, when they light it up, you got the EMF 390 at 20 some milliwatts, and the tri-field meter barely picks up anything. See that? And so, getting north of 3 gigahertz, and you see a huge drop off. And when he hits it at 5 gigahertz, the EMF 390 picks up a signal strength, and the tri-field meter just doesn't. Now, don't expect $100 meter to be like the Starship Enterprise and basically show you a 3-dimensional map of everything that's going on. But they're sensitive enough to tell you that you're in a dangerous situation, and that's really all you need it for. As far as the numbers are concerned, it's probably not as important as knowing if you're really being exposed at a dangerous or extreme level. And you want something that's reliable. You want something that's got a broad enough spectrum to basically show you everything that's going on out there. Now, there are networks that are broadcasting above the 10 gigahertz range. That's the max range of the EMF 390 is 10 gigahertz, and above, I think 6 gigahertz, 7 gigahertz, you start getting diminishing returns. But it still picks some, it still tells you that there's something going on. And if you ever get like a weird feeling somewhere, you should turn on your meter and see, if there's anything that's corresponding. Now, we like the RF browser mode the best. That's the one that you're seeing in, the video right now. Again, we've shown you video. Let's see if we can come back to this. But we've shown you video, of this mode, which is the all-in-one mode. We've shown you the vertical mode. We've shown you other modes as far as, what this meter has in the firmware. But I really like the RF browser, the graph mode, the best. It shows you the peak, the peak dose. Those are the numbers in real time that you see is the peak dose. And you get some visuals, and it just shows you just like how dense the radiation is. And that's really kind of what you want to avoid is the real dense radiation exposure long term. It's one thing to get dosed driving to work, but it's another thing to be sitting in an office environment or a work environment or a sleeping environment with a 50 milliwatt dose nonstop. And that's what you really want to avoid. And some people, think they might be safe, and they discover that there's something that's broadcasting silently. You thought it was off, but it wasn't off, like the printer or something. Or it might be the neighbor's router, or it might be your phone. And we highly advise people to ditch EMF covers for their phone, because they end up turning into like a reflector dish. And so when you open those things up, all of the energy is being deflected in one direction, which is like towards your head, essentially. So we highly advise, not using shielding on the phone directly if you're gonna, open it up and put it to your head. But other shielding strategies work extremely well. Whether it be Mylar, tinfoil, and the like, it works extremely well, up to the point where you can reduce like 99% of the radiation, for like $1, in certain situations. Now, we recommend that people do not use wireless technology like Bluetooth or touchpads and laptops and anything you could pretty much name. Instead, find a tethered alternative, a wired alternative. And Not everybody has Ethernet at home. And so if you have to use like a 4G modem or something like that, get an extension cable for your USB, set it up outside, far away, as far away as you can, and set up a little aluminum behind it to reflect, the radiation away from you, and that'll have a huge effect on your long-term exposure. Now, again, this isn't like something that's going to save you from a tragedy tomorrow. This is something that will save you from a tragedy 5, 10, 20 years down the road. We're seeing a lot of cancer cases at schools. We're seeing a lot of children with cancer. We're seeing a lot of brain cancers out there, and a lot of other illnesses that just really weren't that severe before. The flu in the 90s killed like 10, 20,000 people a year, and a couple years ago it was nearly 100,000 people just from the flu. And we've seen the studies that say that EMF weakens your immune system. Now, as far as best practices for measuring radiation, essentially driving around will give you a real good idea in the RF browser mode. Pointing the device properly at the source of the radiation will help you, and understanding what the numbers mean and what to expect. Again, people expect that if you're 2 feet away from the death tower, that's where the worst of the radiation is going to be. But that's not necessarily the case. I mean, these antennas basically shoot out a stream of radiation in a particular direction. Most of them do. There's the omnidirectional antennas, and then there's the directional antennas. And the standard death towers, like this one, all of these white rectangles, if you will, they shoot a beam in a particular direction. And the round cylinder ones that you see like on a pole like this, I mean, those are omnidirectional, and those aren't as bad, you could say, as the directional antennas, because they've got additional gain, as it's called, and they're focusing the radiation in a specific location. And that's what you want to find out, is where is it? What is the location of the death tower, ladies and gentlemen, that is hitting you? What is the video guy doing? That's the real trick of it. And again, the death towers aren't the biggest threat to what's going on out there. It's really the phones. From our experiments, the phones are the worst by far, as well as your routers and everything you have at home. The radiation level you have at home or at work probably far exceeds being anywhere near these death towers, by far. Now, is it exactly the same type of radiation? That's another question. As far as the metrics are concerned, you're getting exposed more by your cell phone than these death towers. But you look at the power supply, hooked up to these death towers, and you would imagine that, they would be worse. And looking at, the EMF 390, see if we can find, some video of that again. The radiation patterns that we see, with death towers, look more intense in general than on the phone, but the numbers are pretty close, or the cell phones are even worse. Now, you might be asking yourself, how can I get an EMF 390? How do I get one? And the manufacturer, GQ Electronics, sells them on Amazon. Not sure if we've got the website and all that, but they sell them on Amazon for about $150. And you can check out the reviews. I mean, they're just, it's like 97% positive. So, you can't make everybody happy, but it's not a ripoff. It works. 97% of the people are happy with it. And for $100 compared to the competition, I mean, you're certainly not getting ripped off. So, I mean, you could opt for, some of the other ones that maybe look, you know, a little cooler or something. But, you know, this one does the job at a fraction of the price, and it ships directly from Seattle. 1-year warranty. And we sell them on our website for $129. Not sure what the video guy is doing out there. But let's see if we can find the screenshot of all of that. Not sure if that's going to happen anytime soon. I kind of doubt it. I think the video guy's on vacation. But there's just so many videos to sort through here. It's not the video guy's fault, but you can see it on Amazon directly from GQ Electronics. Now, they make like radiation detectors. You know, they're not a one-hit wonder. They make other types of EMF meters and the like, but this one I think is the best value, $129. You can, you know, see all the screenshots and the videos of, you know, other people using it. You can see the guidelines, safety guidelines on our website, stfnreport.com, and we'll leave a link in the description where you can just check all of this stuff out for yourselves. You know, we're not going to go through all of this, but plenty of information there. And if you've ever been wanting to get a meter but have told yourself, I'm not going to spend the $200-$300, you know, et cetera, now you can find out what's going on for $129. When you click order now, that brings you directly to the GQ Electronics website. So you'll be checking out with them. We're not taking your money. They are, but they'll send you the device guaranteed in just a couple of days. It ships real quick. And they've got excellent customer service, and you know, I've had mine for over a year now, and it still works. So I've dropped it a couple times. It's you know, it works better than the iPhone in that sense. But here's the checkout form, and this is essentially what it looks like. And you know, other than that, you know, playing with it and kind of like learning about, you know, what these different modes do is the best way to learn, you know, how to use it. But it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you go into a mode and it's just showing you different metrics, and there's a lot of settings that you can play with in terms of like power density and sensitivity and all of that stuff. And you know, you can see if it makes the world you know, a little more interesting for you there. But essentially, you know, right out of the box, you turn it on, you go into the all-in-one mode, and you're already, you know, exploring the world like you've never seen it before. And it's rather interesting. It really is. And most of the sheeple have no idea what they're getting dosed with. And you know, looking at the amount of radiation that's out there right now, I wouldn't leave home without it, essentially. And I wouldn't go into a new place without you know, kind of like exploring it first with a meter, essentially, because you don't know what's lurking at that store or at that mall or at that location. And you know, a lot of the places are just like set up like death traps, especially the downtowns, the shopping centers, the gas stations. And it's almost to the point where you have to like search for you know, safe locations where you can shop and do your business and the like. But you know, a meter will help you. And the other meters, you know, they're so big or so expensive that, you know, it's like being Inspector Gadget. Whereas this thing, you know, for $100, you just throw in the GPS cradle and drive around, and you know, it works. It's fascinating, especially if you have any kind of like experience with like amateur radio. You know, a lot of these numbers will mean something to you. These graphs will mean something to you. And the more you learn about, you know, what, you know, the EMF 390 is trying to display, the more you'll understand about, you know, the radiation itself, and what it does, and what's safe and what isn't safe. And you know, again, it's, you know, it's the research that's telling us that we should be concerned here. And you know, they're seeing biological effects starting at 0.250 milliwatts, so which is like 250 times, you know, natural radiation. And by the time you start getting to 1,000, 2,000 times natural radiation, I mean, it's, you know, there's a long list of biological effects. Does it cause cancer right away? No. But is it going to impact your quality of life? Absolutely. And, you know, that's what we were saying, you know, early on, was that, This thing not only attacks your immune system, EMF not only attacks the immune system and is linked to cancer, but it interrupts your sleep, makes it more difficult to concentrate, affects your mood, your memory, etc. So, lowering your exposure will improve your quality of life like nearly immediately. Better sleep. I mean, it makes a huge difference. Like, if you're sleeping in a high electric field environment, you can go to sleep and feel more tired waking up than you did when you went to sleep, essentially. And you're just not getting that, that quality sleep that you should be getting. And so, understanding that environment will make you a more productive citizen, a more productive patriot. And, given everything that's going on, right now, you need to be at 110%. You don't need to be sitting in an ultra toxic environment. And so, we get it for that. But honestly, given the entertainment value of this thing, driving around with it and seeing, how people are getting blasted, yeah, it's somewhat satisfying, to be quite honest with you. And you try to warn the sheep, well, they don't want to listen. But it's just like everything else, once you understand the science, once you understand, what's going on in that domain, you really have a leg up on everybody else. It's like experience in general. I guess we'll leave it there for this broadcast. This ended up being a long-winded broadcast for the EMF 390, but we feel that, for 129, it's a steal. And it supports our broadcast. It supports our ability to reach out to more people and the like. And everybody that gets one, is now 10 times more educated about EMF than ever before. And they're in a position where they can show people what's going on. And it'll really kind of like step up your activism. And we're recommending that people start groups, anti-5G groups and the like, and as a kind of like a community support group, for people that are like-minded. And a meter is an excellent way to show newbies what they're being exposed to. Now, they may not get it right away, but just plant the seed. They'll be back. They'll hear something in the news later. Somebody else will tell them something about EMF, and then all of a sudden they'll be a little more concerned. So just, add, your voice to the choir, and make sure that you're talking about, the dangers of EMF and the like. And, it's just outrageous seeing what people are being exposed to these days, especially kids and the like. They can't opt out. And so everybody should be raising awareness. And again, you really want one of these in your survival toolkit, because this can be handy in other ways. In the doomsday world or the Mad Max world, this could probably help you find civilization again or something. Oh look, we got a transmission. Something must be out here. So, and that could be used for a lot of other things too. Tracking down your next target, I suppose. We'll leave it there for this broadcast. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Until the next time, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, does the radiation ever go down to zero wherever this dude's at? That's the question. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how bad it is, in some places, even out in the country. But, if you live in this kind of town, you may want to, escape, because not every town is the same, and you could just go on and on. But it's horrible. Where this guy lives, I know this guy. This is Luke Skywalker. That's Luke Skywalker's video. And, he's way out in the beautiful mountains, and they're just getting super dosed. They're like making up for the other eugenics programs they're not getting dosed with. Till the next time, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you are the resistance.